Call this council meeting to order. If you are able, please rise for our national anthem, followed by our land acknowledgement.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command, car ton bras s'est porté l'épée, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
The Niagara region is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations such as the Hattaway-Wendourok, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The city of Port Colborne stands with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live.
Okay, item 4 is the adoption of the agenda. We have two additions tonight, two delegations, one written and one oral delegation. We have one item of correspondence that's been added. If I could have Councilors Bodner and Hoyle move that the regular council agenda dated February 24th, 2026 be confirmed as amended. Any changes to the agenda or questions on the agenda? All in favor? That's carried. Are there any disclosures of interest this evening? We have one presentation, Indigenous Colonial Relations, Communities Connecting. Tonight we have a presentation from Brian Kahn on Indigenous Colonial Relations. And Brian, if you can come on up to the podium. And again, welcome to the city of Port Colborne. We work very well with Brian on a number of events here in the city, and Brian is our Indigenous Relations Officer at the region. So thank you, Brian.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this evening. So let's just see if I do this right. There we go. Nope, messed up already. How do I go back one? I can go from there. All right. Okay. Can I go to the next slide? Try now. There we go. All right. All right, thank you. So just very briefly, what I'm going to be talking about today is I'm going to give you some information about terminology, what's the right words to use, what words you might want to avoid. A little bit of information about the Indigenous populations of this land that we refer to as Canada. There's some colonial impacts that have occurred over the last 500 years that I'm going to touch on very briefly, and then give an introduction to some of the Indigenous community right here in Niagara region. So actually starting with lesson number 1. Lesson number 1 is when Indigenous people gather together, they do introductions around the table. We won't do that tonight, so don't worry, but I'll do the introductions to give you an idea. When you do meet with Indigenous people, it's important that you build a relationship with them right from the very start. And so that comes down to how you introduce yourself, your name, your title, where you're from, not really what we're looking for. So my name is Brian Kahn. I am Métis. I'm from the Métis homeland of the Red River Settlement, or Winnipeg. I've been living in Niagara region now for 30 years. I'm a father, a grandfather, I'm a husband, I'm a brother, I'm an uncle, I'm a cousin. I'd like to think I'm a friend to people, some of whom are in the room here today, maybe all of you. I'm a firekeeper. I am also an Indigenous artist, and I am an advocate for Indigenous people. I use some of the talents that I've been given to raise my voice on behalf of others in my community, some of whom don't have the opportunity. I'm also the board president of the Orange Shirt Society, so if you know anything about Phyllis Webstad and the Orange Shirt story, I run the board, I'm the president of the board of directors with her, so I'm very honored to do that. Part of my presentation today is going to be looking at the history of this country. In order for us to understand where we are, we need to know where we came from. And I think it's important for me to declare up front that this is a no-blame zone. Anything that I share tonight is not intended to make anyone feel guilty or bad. I am just sharing the true history of this country. Most of us never had that as an opportunity when we were going through school. I've done a presentation in the past on behalf of one of the museums, and in the middle of my presentation, when I was talking about Indian residential schools, a woman stood up in the middle of my presentation and pointed her finger at me and called me a liar. That she said, my country wouldn't do that to children. And so my response to her was, you didn't learn this in school, even I didn't learn it in school. But listen to your grandchildren, because this is something that they are learning in school today. So for most of us in the room here, some of what I'm sharing might be brand new. As far as terminology, I'm going to start off with an easy one, Turtle Island. Throughout my presentation, I will be referencing Turtle Island. And for those that are from the non-Indigenous part of the community, Turtle Island really refers to North America, Canada, United States, Mexico, and into the Caribbean. It comes from creation stories. So different nations have their own creation stories of how the people came to be on this land. And for most of them, the stories have us on the back of a great sea turtle. And so with that, there is also your second lesson, that the land that we're on is living, and that we have a responsibility to keep her safe and to keep her healthy. And to do that, and in doing that, she will make sure that we have a healthy place for us to live as well. We're going to go back a few hundred years. So with the arrival of the newcomers from across the great waters, they came with not only a desire to find new trade routes around the world and also potentially discover new lands, they came with something from the Pope Alexander VI, and it was something called the Doctrine of Discovery. And under the Doctrine of Discovery, it was a papal decree that any of the explorers that went out were basically told that any land that they found that was inhabited by anyone that was non-Christian, they were considered non-human. And if they're non-human, they don't exist. And so therefore, the lands that they're discovering are free lands for the taking. And so that is how, for the start of the journey from other parts of the world onto this land, that is how the explorers first came. If we look to Christopher Columbus in 1492, when he arrived, he came with that doctrine. In 2022, that doctrine is still in place. And in fact, it makes its way into the courtrooms in Canada and the United States whenever there are land claim issues. The doctrine of discovery, the fact that this was vacant land, still holds true today. In 2023, while the Pope didn't pull back on the doctrine of discovery, he did acknowledge that it was a racist document intended for the expansion of the crown heads of Europe at the time. The term Indian. Some people, I've noticed, will whisper it when they're in a crowd because they're not sure if they're allowed to say it or not. I will say that the term Indian is one that I would use caution in when and how you use it. Tone and context plays a big part of how to use the term. But it is a term that is in place in many of the pieces of legislation. And some of the examples that I'll be going through today, you'll see the term Indian used throughout. There is the Indian residential schools that we talk about in schools and that I've already referenced. The Constitution from 1982 references Indians. So the terminology is one that is still in place. The Indian Act is also a piece of legislation that is currently on the books here in Canada. The term Native is a term that I wouldn't recommend that is used, but I certainly wouldn't suggest that you refrain from using it. Locally here, we have the Fort Erie Native Friendship Center, the Niagara chapter of Native Women. Or if we go a little bit further into the region, the Niagara Regional Native Center. So the term Native is used by Indigenous people, Native Americans, Native Canadians, etc. But the problem with that term is it's such a generic term that it refers to native plants, native animals, native people. And in fact, if you look it up in the dictionary, it basically means if you were born there, you're native to that land. So basically anyone that is born on this land can consider themselves to be native. So a little bit of caution in using that one. Aboriginal is a term that is used quite often, and again, it's made its way into a number of pieces of legislation that are still in existence today. It's kind of fallen out of favor. It is a term that is intended to refer to all three of the Indigenous people from this land, so First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. One of the issues with Aboriginal is it refers more to the Indigenous people of other parts of the world. And so if you were to do a Google search, so I worked for a school board prior to where I work now at Niagara Region, and the teachers would often do Google searches for information, and if they did Aboriginal, oftentimes they would end up with information from New Zealand or Australia. So a little bit of caution with that, but Canada's Constitution does in fact use the word Aboriginal. The preferred term is Indigenous. Indigenous is a collective of, again, all three, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. It should never be referred to, if you're referring to First Nations people, you should be referring to First Nations people. And more ideally, if you know what nation they are, refer to them by their actual nation, not the generic term of Indigenous. But if you are talking about a collective, the term Indigenous is absolutely fine to use. So again, it does refer to all three of the first people of this land here on Canada. The term Indigenous, though, is not just to this land. When we're referring to the Indigenous people here, one of the recommendations is that you refer to the Indigenous people of Turtle Island. That clearly identifies the history and the legacy of the people that have been here for tens of thousands of years. According to Amnesty International, the definition of Indigenous really refers to anyone who has lived on the land and another people have come onto that land and taken control and put the original people under their control. And so with that, the population of the world actually has about 6% of it is made up of Indigenous people. There's 90 countries around the world that have Indigenous people, about 476 million people on this planet, 5,000 different peoples, and about 4,000 languages make up the Indigenous people of this globe. The Constitution Act of 1982 does talk, as you can see here, does reference some of the terms that would not be my first choice: Aboriginal, Indian, and then Inuit and Métis. One of the issues for the Indigenous community is we recognize if we were to argue and take these words out, we take ourselves out of the legislation. So even something like the Indian Act, which is a racist piece of legislation that was first written in 1876 and is still on the books today, if we take those terms out, then potentially we're taking ourselves out of any of the benefits that may have come along with these pieces of legislation as well. We are a diverse people. We don't all look the same. We don't all present the same. Our histories are different. Our languages are different. Our cultures and our pride is different. One thing that may be a surprise, maybe not, is that there are many people in this country that think Indigenous people no longer exist. So it's important to realize that, as in the land acknowledgement that was read out earlier today, we're also acknowledging the First Nation, Métis, and Inuit who are on this land today, not only for the thousands of years prior to first contact from Europe. It's a part of who we are. As far as the makeup in Canada, we're a small population. We're under 2 million, but we're one of the fastest growing populations in the country. In 2016, we were 4% of the population. 2021, we were 5%. Now we're closer to 6%. So we're growing. It's not necessarily that we're having a bunch of babies. What's actually happening is that people who in the past were afraid to acknowledge who they were are now taking pride in their ancestry and their history, and they're identifying as being Indigenous. And in fact, going back to the terminology of Indian, there are many people within my community that proudly now announce themselves to be Indian, because it was a term they had to hide from, and it was a term of shame for so many years. And now that the pride is coming back, they're pulling back on that terminology themselves. In this description of the stats from Stats Canada, there's also a category that refers to other. On this land, there has been a lot that has happened towards the Indigenous people, and as a result of that, many of the Indigenous people of this land don't know who they are. They don't know what nation they are. It's not just that they've lost their family, they've lost their total connection to their community. And I have had a number of people come up to me at public events and say, but look at me, I should know. People expect me to know who I am. But the alternate to that, when I worked for the school board, was also, look at me. I don't present the traditional way that you would expect. So in your classroom, be prepared that you might have children that actually have Indigenous heritage and culture. They're proud of it, but they may not look it. So the 64,000 people, according to 2021 Stats Canada, are those people that really are lost. They don't know who they are. So if we look to the First Nations, they are the first people of this land. There is physical proof that for 40,000 years, there have been people on this land that is referred to as Turtle Island. There's been footprints, there's been cave drawings and cave etchings that have been found. We know in the Niagara region for 1,000 years before Niagara Falls formed as a water feature, there was people living right here. So the first people of this land have been here for a long time. When it was said that the New World was discovered, I think it's more accurate that the people of this land discovered the explorers as they got lost trying to find their way to the spice routes in India. There was anywhere between 60 to 90 million people on the North and South American continents. So it wasn't a small population. We were well entrenched onto the land. On this land that we refer to as Canada, there's about 630 different First Nations. So it is a diverse group as well. Each of them are separated based on geography. They're separated based on languages, culture, and traditions. So again, with the land acknowledgement that was read out today, the land acknowledgement that we say here in Niagara is different than the land acknowledgement that would be said anywhere else. Even as close as Hamilton will have a different land acknowledgement because different people lived in the area by tradition. In Niagara, we have two strong confederacies that we celebrate here, and that's the Haudenosaunee, or Six Nations, which is made up of the Onondaga, Oneida, Cayuga, Seneca, Tuscarora, Mohawk, and I think that was all six. I may have lost track. But Haudenosaunee is referring basically to the Six Nations that are here. They follow the Iroquois language. That's what pulls them together, but each of those nations has their own dialect. So even though they're part of Six Nations, they may not necessarily be able to communicate in their traditional tongue. There's also the Anishinaabe, which is another confederacy that is pulled together from the Oji-Cree to the Ojibwe to the Chippewa, the Mississaugas, etc. So these nations have lived on this land for thousands of years as well. The Inuit have been on this land for thousands of years. There's not as much proof as to how long they've been on this continent, but they have been here for thousands of years. They are different than First Nations. You cannot mix thinking that they're the same people. They are very different in their makeup. They're very different in their lifestyle. Obviously, location, temperatures where they live, et cetera, the animals, et cetera, that they survive with and on are different than what are in the more southern parts of this continent. The Inuit can be pronounced, you can pronounce them either Inuit or Inuit. Either is correct. Some people are unsure which way to go. If you're talking to a single person of Inuit heritage, you would refer to them as Inuk. On this land that's referenced as Canada, there are 4 different large communities, 4 different languages that are Inuktitut that are spoken on this land. One thing that's different about the Inuit compared to the First Nations and the Métis is the Inuit are actually not just on North America, not just on Turtle Island. These people are actually found in Alaska, Greenland, and Russia. So that's something that's unique to them as original people, that they're not just from North America where the First Nations and the Métis solely come from Turtle Island itself. The Métis are probably one of the most misunderstood of the Indigenous people. Our grandmothers have been around for thousands of years. Our grandfathers may have come from other parts of the world, but our grandmothers have been here for thousands of years, just as the First Nations and in some cases even the Inuit. It was thought at one point, and for a long time, that Métis were basically anyone who was of mixed heritage, anyone who was First Nations or Inuit mixed with European heritage. That's not the case. In order for you to be Métis, that Métis heritage had to have, or that mixing had to happen before colonization, before Canada formed as a country, basically. And it wasn't just that you could live in isolation. For Métis to exist, it wasn't just that first mixing of those two bloodlines that were referred to initially as half-breeds or mixed bloods or country-born. It was when there was enough of them on this land that they started to form communities of their own, that the Métis nation of this land was actually created. So to be Métis is not simply just having that mixed heritage, it's having the mixed heritage that goes back hundreds of years on this land. So my ancestry can be traced back specifically to a first grandfather in the 1700s. The Métis have had some challenges along the way. The Canadian government, the British Crown, did not want to recognize the Métis people. So when treaties were being formed, the Métis were held back specifically. Louis Riel is someone that stood up for the Métis people. He was actually one of Canada's first human rights activists. He was not only fighting for the rights of the Métis, he was fighting for the rights of First Nations and anyone who spoke French. He was executed in 1865, getting mixed up on my times, but 1865 on November 16th, 1885. At that time, most Métis went into hiding, so the Métis people almost disappeared from this land, because if you had the more traditional characteristics, you went into the First Nations. If you had the more European characteristics as far as how you looked, you went into the general community. So we almost disappeared. So much so that for those who wanted to hold on to their Métis heritage, they had no land. Their lands were taken away, their possessions were taken away from them, and they became known as the road allowance people. The only land that they were allowed to live on was the ditches that followed the train lines that were being built at the time, or any of the roadways that were being built. The worldview of Indigenous people. I will say I'm obviously going through this quickly. I've got 500 years plus of history, and I do recommend that this is only an introduction. Really, to learn about the Indigenous people, you need to bring in the First Nations, you need to bring in the Métis specifically, and bring in the Inuit to hear their story and their perspectives. But our worldview in general was very different than that of those who came from other parts of the world at the time when the explorers were coming here. For Indigenous people, it was circular. There were the four seasons that went around. There's the life cycle that goes around, etc. Whereas the Europeans who came to this land were very much from a viewpoint of dominance and land control. So it was a very different worldview. And so that is something that is carried on for hundreds of years. And so even more recently, there has been some altercations when it comes to land claims, etc. The Indian Act that I referenced was put in place at first in 1876. So the Constitution came into place in 1867, well, the British North American Act in 1867, and then shortly thereafter, the Indian Act was put into place, because under the British North American Act, the First Nations, or the Indians, were placed under colonial control. They were made wards of the state or wards of the crown. The intent of the act was actually to assimilate them and to get them to give up their identity, their heritage, their culture, and really who they were. Our cultures and practices were restricted. It was actually illegal for even 3 First Nation men to gather in a single place. If they ran the risk of being arrested. We had a very established government system within the Indigenous communities, and that was also being altered on us, that we had to take on the more European style of government. Standing in front of a municipality, I guess that's the wrong thing to be saying, but a lot of the land was put into land trusts. Most First Nations in particular were put onto reserves. They don't own the land, they don't own their homes. Those are homes that are maybe provided for them, but they can't improve them. They can't do anything to them because they don't own them. The Indian Act also determined who was classified an Indian. And under that, an Indigenous or First Nation man, if he married a non-Indigenous woman and they had children, the children were considered status Indians. The wife became status Indian, even though she had no Indigenous blood in her. But then a woman who married a non-Indigenous man and had children, everyone lost their status, including the woman herself, lost her status. So there's been a number of changes to the Act over the years, but it's still very much racist and very gender-based as far as how it's put in place. It also controlled the education and set up the groundwork for the Indian residential schools here in Canada. Just some quick points here, that it was only in 1956 that under the Citizen Act that anyone who was First Nations was considered to be a citizen of Canada. And in 1960 was the first time First Nations people were allowed to vote in a federal election without giving up their status as far as who they were. That brings us into the intergenerational trauma that has been on this land for decades. The Indian residential schools is a topic unto itself, so I won't go into it, but we will acknowledge that it did happen on this land. But it wasn't just that. More of us are becoming aware of the Indian residential schools and what happened, but the federal government also had a department called AIM, or Adopt an Indian or Métis. And so there was a federal government established specifically to take Indigenous children away from their families and to place them into the homes of white families. That was an active program for the federal government at the time. And as a result of that, many of those children lost their identity, as I had said earlier. And in some cases, those children were taken away and adopted. And the parents were not only asked about the situation, in some cases they only found out that their children had been adopted out from underneath them, literally. Intergenerational trauma is not something that is just in the history books. As recent as 2020, birth alerts in this province were in place, which means that if a woman came in, delivered a baby, if for any reason the staff or anyone in the community felt that there were any concerns for that child, the baby would be taken away from them. So that is something that has been in place in this country right up until 2021, in this province right up until 2020. Those children that are taken away, while children under the age of 14 only make up about 8% of the entire population here in Canada, you can see on this map here the proportion of children that are in foster care. Especially going towards the west, it's quite significant, but even again here in the province of Ontario, it's almost a third of the children in care are Indigenous children. Our incarceration rate of Indigenous people is significantly higher than those who are non-Indigenous. Anyone who is Indigenous that does make their way into the jail system, they're less likely to receive parole and are more likely to fulfill their entire sentence rather than being released early. Indigenous women in this country have a higher rate of murder by a number of 12. Racism, whether we're ready to acknowledge it or not, does exist. Everything from Joyce Echaquan, who was brave enough to film what was happening to her on her deathbed in an emergency room in a hospital, to even some of the things that are happening where people are pretending to be of Indigenous heritage and taking away opportunities from those that have the true heritage. Racism exists in this country. And sometimes those racist experiences, seem rather simple. Totem poles are actually a very sacred item within the Indigenous culture, but you need to know that that does not represent all Indigenous people, yet it often is used as a symbol of Indigenous culture, right through to in the classroom, where there are classroom projects of creating totem poles. And as you can see in the lower photo, that the animals that are on the totem poles in the classroom are not necessarily those from this part of the land. Yet totems represent culture, they represent history, they represent family and significant events. And oftentimes they represent the graves of ancestors. So there's a great deal right in the classroom of disrespecting the true culture and the true history of this land, all the way into the stores. My wife and I went for breakfast the other day, and there was a huge poster where we were eating, and on the poster it had an image of a gas station, and it was referred to as the Red Indian gas station. So even today, I'm faced with some of these racist images. Our art is often replicated. I'm an artist myself, and I do teach others who are non-Indigenous my style of art, but I also warn them, if you copy me, I'm okay with that. It's a form of flattery, but don't claim to be Indigenous. Where there have been cases, and in Toronto a few years ago, there was an artist that there was a great deal of backlash. She was copying Norvell Morrisseau. And again, you could say it's a form of flattery that she was copying him, but it was right down to how she signed her name. That in Indigenous culture, we didn't have written languages. So as the newcomers came, there was a form of symbols that were used to bring on the different phonetics of pronunciation of the Indigenous languages. And she used those phonetic symbols in how she signs her name. So while the images might have been intended to show respect to Norvell, she was fooling people in how she was signing those paintings at the same time. We can go to sports teams, their names, their logos, their mascots, and I still hear even today, recently, a friend down in the south seems to think that this is a way of honoring the Indigenous people, and I can assure you that in 99%, if not 100% of the time, it's not actually viewed by the Indigenous people as being an honor. There have been a couple of national publications that have come out. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission in 2015, their final report about the Indian residential schools and ways to work towards reconciliation with the Indigenous people. And a few years later in 2019, the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women, Girls, and Two-Spirit Calls for Justice was released as well. So again, when we're talking about racism and the impact on Indigenous people, it is still, it is being recognized, but it is something that we have to do something with. To have it just in these publications does nothing. We actually have to start activating some of the calls. And so the Truth and Reconciliation call number 57 is to educate municipal and different levels of government. So again, I thank you for bringing me in here today. We are a proud and resilient community. Although I was just speaking with Phyllis Webstad yesterday, and she said, I'm tired of being told I'm resilient. I've been fighting and struggling to try to get recognition of what we've experienced, and resilience just doesn't represent who I am any longer. So that really broke my heart to hear someone like her, who has been very brave in sharing her story and bringing along with her other survivors, to hear her say that. Just very quickly, in our own community here, there are 3 Indigenous governments, 6 nations of the Grand River, Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Those 2 are on reserves that are just outside of Niagara region. They do have some jurisdiction in this area, the Mississaugas in particular. There are 2 treaties that cover the entire region of Niagara, and the Mississaugas are named in both of them. But we also have to look at what 6 nations and the warriors during the War of 1812 did do in protecting the borders and protecting this land that has been strong as Canada. So we recognize them as well. The Métis Nation of Ontario they do have a local office, but they don't have their full government representation in Niagara, but we do have to recognize them as a full independent government. There are some organizations that are right here within Niagara Region itself, the Niagara Regional Native Center, the Niagara Region Métis Council, Indigenous Diabetes Health Circle, Des Droits de Desnay, the Aboriginal Health Center, NAPAM, which is the Niagara Peninsula Area Aboriginal Management Board. It's a great youth management program, the Fort Erie Native Friendship Center, and the Niagara Chapter of Native Women. Some key dates for you to be aware of: May 5th, Red Dress Day, is a national day of recognizing murdered and missing Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. June is a month of pride, but with that, it's also Indigenous Peoples Month. And while the 2 are 2 different topics, they work perfectly together. Within Indigenous culture, people who were Two-Spirited prior to colonization were people who were respected and honored. They are people that had a different worldview and could see the world from both perspectives. And so pride within the Indigenous people is multifaceted in this case. September 30th, it was Orange Shirt Day. 3 years ago, it became, I guess it's more than 3 years ago now, 4 years ago, it became the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. While that's appreciated as a national recognition of the day and the events, it was Orange Shirt Day first. The Indigenous people claimed it as Orange Shirt Day. So any of your proclamations that you do for that day, I ask you to include firsthand Orange Shirt Day, then National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. Another day for you to be aware of, and please come join me at Queenston Heights on November 8th. It's Indigenous Veterans Day. So the Saturday closest to November 8th, there is a Victory and Valor celebration of Indigenous veterans on this land. And I'm definitely out of time, so I thank you for using the Niagara Region land acknowledgement. It does respect not only the history of this land, it also respects the Indigenous people of this land that are part of community today. And with that, I'll leave it as my thank you. Miigwech, merci, merci. Thank you.
Great, Brian. Thank you for coming again. It's good to see you. As I said earlier, we do work very well together with yourself with a number of events here in Port Colborne. Any questions from council? Oh, Councillor Aquilino.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much for your presentation. I just wanted to say that I work for the federal government, and so there has been a lot of movement, I feel, that's happened over the last few years. I don't think it's anywhere near what needs to happen. Part of my division has an Indigenous secretariat within it. We follow the Many Voices, One Mind procedure, and the curious blanket exercises we've done in the past and things like that. But I think it's important for people to be aware of the culture, and I really appreciate that you came to council to do this, and thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I do want to throw out one more date, just super quick. March 7th, so just 2 weeks away, the Fort Erie Native Friendship Center is holding their powwow, and I would invite each and every one of you to come and attend the powwow. It's open to community. It starts at 12 o'clock. It runs till 5 o'clock. It's free to get into. It's a great opportunity to see Indigenous culture firsthand and to experience it. So again, just a quick invite to each and every one of you.
Okay, Councillor Bruno.
Thank you. Thank you for the excellent presentation. I had two questions. One is, you may not have mentioned, or if you mentioned it, I'm sorry, I didn't pick up on it. Can you give us any idea of the Indigenous population in Niagara, the numbers?
I should know that, and I do know it's in the thousands. So it's not a small population. First Nations is definitely the largest. Métis follows right behind. The Inuit population in this area is small. And when I referenced the governments, you could see that I didn't reference an Inuit government. The closest office that you could go to for any strong cultural Inuit culture would be in Toronto or all the way to Ottawa before you could get any strong support. But Métis and the First Nations are very strong here, and it would be in the thousands. In my mind, I'm remembering the number 5,000, but I'm not 100% going to stand by that. But we'll go with it.
Thank you. The other question I have, this came up with, when you're sort of around friends and family and you have conversations. I think all of us as Canadians, were kind of shocked when we heard about Truth and Reconciliation and all that. And I think a lot of Canadians were totally unaware of what was going on and what's now very much seen the light of day in the media and that. And opportunities like tonight for 15 minutes, we learned a lot, but I'm just wondering if there's things that you're doing or if you've been invited into the schools where the next generation of people won't be as in the dark, as I think we all were growing up.
No, that's absolutely a fair statement. It was not well documented within the school system up until recently. And I will credit the Truth and Reconciliation hearings that went on right across this country from 2008 to 2014, where stories started to come out. And there are still many people who don't believe what they're hearing. I've stood on the ground. I've been at we have an Indian residential school just outside of Niagara region in Brantford. And actually that's the oldest one in the country. It predates the legislation of Indian residential schools by at least 70 years. So the oldest one is the Mohawk Institute, or the Mush Hole, is the way it's referred. I've been there. I've been on the ground site where Phyllis Webstad went to school. And in September of this year, I had the honor of touring the Kamloops site as well. And that's a very humbling experience to witness that. It's sacred ground now. You're not allowed to take photos in the direction of where the children are buried. But a lot is happening in the school systems now to tell the truth. And to the credit of the province of Ontario, within the school system, every school board has to have what's called an Indigenous lead. And so I was an Indigenous lead for one of the school boards here, the Catholic school board here. Not every school board hires an Indigenous person, but both school boards in Niagara, their teams are with Indigenous people. So you're hearing it from those with lived experience, those of us who have had family members who are directly impacted by some of the topics that I mentioned today.
Okay, further questions? Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Brian. Just the Indigenous school that was in Brantford that is there, and there's a museum there. And my wife and I had the good fortune of going there and talking to the curator, and that is open to the public, and it's quite interesting if you wanted to go and see that. It's very good. And I guess I'm like a lot of people. My family's unsure of what to do sometimes. We watch documentaries on the residential schools, and it's heart-wrenching, and you can't believe that someone thought that was a good idea. But I guess the next step is, how do you relate to that? How do you say, I'm sorry about that? There isn't a rule book that you go and look at, right? So I don't know. I think a lot of people have that problem where it seems unbelievable, and it is terrible, and it was. But then how do you can't make it right, but who do you express that feeling to, I don't know whether you have an answer to that, but, and different people may have a different answer I can relate to. But.
Well, definitely each individual will have to handle it on their own, but you said something that I think is important. I don't think you have to apologize. It goes back to one of the first slides that I showed, that what I'm saying here today and what we're talking about at this moment is not intended to blame anybody. It is part of the history of this land. The biggest thing that can be done is for people to acknowledge that it did happen here. For those that argue and say it didn't happen, or to say that those graves don't exist, you don't need the ground penetrating radar to prove there are the stories. Two of the residential schools that I was at, one where Phyllis Webstad went in Williams Lake, I met with a group of survivors, and every one of them referenced, even though many of the buildings have been taken down, where the incinerator building was. When we did the tour of the Kamloops residential school, there were 2 incinerator buildings on the property. One of them right beside the kitchen and the laundry where the girls were. People don't want to acknowledge that that is the cruelty that actually went on in these institutions. And as hard as it is to acknowledge, I think that's where we have to go. We have to realize that the atrocities were that bad. However, I did get corrected one time. I was told by survivors, don't call me a student. I didn't learn at that school. I'm an inmate. And so I used that actually when I was with the school board and referenced that. And then one of the teachers came to me and said, my aunt went to an Indian residential school. And in fact, she credits her experience as getting her master's in psychology, I think it was. So not all the experiences were bad, but we also have to recognize how low we did go within that was totally unchecked. Canada's own medical director at the time in 1907 wrote about the atrocities that were happening, and everyone ignored him. He repeated it in 1922. During the First and Second World War, the Indigenous people were among the fastest to sign up to defend this land over here. And so they shared with their brothers and sisters in arms their experiences. But when they came back, everyone forgot. There's a young boy by the name of Chani Wenjack who froze to death along the railways. My niece's mother went to the same school as Chani, and it was so bad that he chose to freeze to death rather than go back to the school. And that was in 1967. It was, everyone was horrified. Maclean's magazine wrote articles about it, and again, people were horrified, but then we forgot about it. Survivors started talking about their experiences at the Indian residential schools during the Truth and Reconciliation hearings. People were appalled, and then they forgot about it. 2021, when the Kamloops discovery of the 215 children happened, everyone was appalled. My fear is they're going to forget. So we've gone on cycles, we got to remember. And so that is the road to reconciliation, is not to push it off and to forget. It's to always remember, and to remember that if we're not careful, it could be repeated. So.
All set? Further questions? Once again, Brian, thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Council, tonight we have 2 delegations. The first is Aaron Butler from MPG Planning Solutions, Inc. And then our second is a written delegation from Maureen Anthony's of 25 3rd Avenue, which is included in your package. So at this time, I'll call Aaron Butler up from MPG. And this is to deal with item 11.3C, recommendation report for draft plan of subdivision, approval for Mapleview subdivision. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As he said, I'm Aaron Butler with NPG Planning Solutions. We're the agent on the Mapleview subdivision file, which is on the agenda tonight, report 2026-29. The official plan and zoning bylaw amendment were approved back in November, I believe it was. And at that meeting, I had a presentation where I walked through the changes that we had made from the original submission to the revised submissions. I don't have a presentation this evening. I'm joined by Sean Tilley and Sina Nurbach with Golden Falcon Homes. We're simply here this evening to support the recommendation report. We've had a chance to review the recommendation report and the conditions of approval. We have worked closely with staff, and we thank the staff and members of the public that have been interested in the proposal and the council, and are supportive of the conditions as well. I just wanted to also express that Golden Falcon is taking steps already towards detailed design, working with the staff here at the town, at the city, to file the applications for a community improvement plan for the brownfield remediation. And so things are continue to move along towards remediation and servicing and ultimately clearance of conditions and registration of the subdivision. So it's a big milestone here this evening. So we wanted to be here really to be available in case there are any questions at this time for us on the subdivision application before you this evening.
Great, thanks, Aaron. Any questions to the speaker at this time? The report is coming forward, so. Okay, thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.
On to the mayor's report. I want to take a moment to speak about the recent discussions around potential changes to municipal governance in Niagara, including possible amalgamation following the letter from Niagara Region Chair Bob Gale that's on our addendum today. I know many of you are wondering what this could mean for Port Colborne, and while we currently have more questions than answers, I wanted to speak to you directly as we work through these conversations together. As I said in my public statement on Friday, I am disappointed in how this discussion has come about. Port Colborne is a very strong and independent community with significant momentum, and I do not believe we need to be forcefully amalgamated with other municipalities to continue building on that success. Discussions of this magnitude, given their potential to fundamentally reshape how our communities are governed, must be approached thoughtfully and transparently, with meaningful consultation involving municipalities, residents, and our community partners. Our residents expect decisions of this scale to be guided by evidence, open dialogue, and a respect for local voices. At the same time, I recognize that there are legitimate challenges worth examining, particularly at the upper tier level. Across Niagara, we continue to face pressures related to the delivery and cost of major infrastructure, such as water, wastewater, and regional roads. I support a serious and constructive review that looks at how we can improve coordination, reduce duplication, and ensure taxpayers are receiving value for money. That conversation is both necessary and appropriate. However, a review of governance does not automatically mean amalgamation. Both scholarly research and experiences across Ontario show that amalgamation is not a guaranteed path to savings or improved outcomes. Last night, Chair Gale appeared at Fort Erie Town Council to discuss his proposal. It was an important opportunity to hear directly about his views on governance reform, but the discussion also highlighted significant gaps in his proposal. While he spoke at length about rising costs for taxpayers, deferred infrastructure funding, and the need for change, he acknowledged he had not done any sort of analysis, does not have any data demonstrating savings, and has not developed even a semblance of a business case or transition plan. He confirmed that options such as amalgamation are being put forward without modeling impacts on service levels, policing costs, labor harmonization, or local planning processes, and that he expects the province to do that work later. That approach raises serious concerns about advancing structural change before fully understanding the consequences for residents and communities. Amalgamation is not a silver bullet and does not automatically reduce costs, particularly when the largest drivers, such as policing and infrastructure obligations, remain unchanged regardless of governance structure. If you want your voice heard, I encourage you to share your feedback directly with Chair Gale by email at bob.gale@niagararegion.ca or to me, mayor@portcolborne.ca. Please note that the deadline for comments is next week, so I encourage all of you to share your thoughts as soon as possible. The city has also added information to our website to help residents stay informed, and we are committed to being as transparent as possible as we work through this. Because as I've said already in my remarks today, transparency and accountability are important. And as I've said here in Port Colborne, we are a strong, independent community that has built real momentum in recent years. We have attracted more than $2 billion in new investment and jobs over the past 2 years, and are strengthening our marine and industrial base, advancing critical priorities like affordable and missing middle housing and new childcare spaces, and taking proactive steps to secure a strong healthcare future for our residents. We have also stepped up to meet the province's identified priorities by accelerating housing, reducing development charges to encourage investment, and working closely with provincial partners on new governance tools, including establishing a municipal services corporation to help fund the servicing of these side employment lands. Council and senior staff believe there is a better path forward that focuses on practical solutions rather than large-scale amalgamation. Today, some of the water, wastewater, and road infrastructure within our community is operated and maintained by Niagara Region, which is a driving force behind the high costs of water and wastewater in Port Colborne. We believe the City of Port Colborne is well positioned to take on the responsibility for all water, wastewater, and road infrastructure locally. We are confident we could manage these services in a way that is more affordable for taxpayers and grounded in strong, responsible asset management. We have a plan in place and a proven track record of managing our infrastructure carefully, and we believe this approach can help control costs and protect service levels without the disruption and potential cost increases that often come with amalgamation. Like our Prime Minister recently said, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. As Mayor, I intend to make sure Port Colborne is at the table, standing up for our community, putting forward practical solutions, and making sure our voice is heard clearly in these discussions. We will advocate for what is the best interest of our residents, protect the progress we've made, and work constructively with our partners to shape a path forward that reflects the needs and values of Port Colborne. In closing, let me be clear. I believe in a strong and independent Port Colborne today and for years to come. And I look forward to continuing this conversation in a way that reflects the values and interests of our whole community. Council, comments or questions with regards to the Mayor's report? Councillor Aquilina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate everything that you've said, and I concur with everything you said. This has weighed on me over the last few days, reading both emails, and if I could, I've written something just that I'd like to read. You've touched on a lot of it a lot more eloquently than I have, but okay. On January 27th, so less than a month ago, Regional Councillor Gale stood beside me at the podium to address our council to introduce himself. Since then, he has sent letters to the mayors and to Minister Flack regarding a plan for amalgamation with the option of one city or four city structure proposal to Minister Flack. He bases his conclusions on personal opinions about vague patterns that have emerged from his deliberations and public reporting. He provides no supporting data to explain his thoughts. I will support him in saying and speaking out for the residents, and that his intention is that he's putting the residents in his thoughts about the high increase in taxes, something that I agree with. This is something that I've struggled with on my first term, going through the past 3 budget discussions. I personally don't take the budget process lightly. I think that it's very challenging to weigh the costs of requiring capital expenditures that will save taxpayers for years to come with improving on our infrastructure, at the same time weighing the impact that tax increases will have on each household. I had many questions when we first heard the news about the possible amalgamation, and luckily last night, Regional Councillor Gale attended the Fort Erie Council and spoke to the mayor and council, and they had the opportunity to pose questions to him, most of which were ones that I had in my head. Mayor Redekop and our mayor, as well as the other mayors, have been tasked to respond by March 3rd, as Mayor Steele indicated, which is 1 week from today. It was made very clear by Regional Council Gale's answers to questions by the Fort Erie mayor and councillors that he has no plan in place. He has no data to support his personal interpretations. His plan is simply to collect the mayor's inputs from all 12 municipalities and any residents and put them into a folder and package them up and send them to Minister Flack with the expectation for the minister to analyze, assess, and come up with a plan for the Niagara region. He solely has made this decision, but cannot substantiate anything with anything other than taxes and infrastructure backlog and going back 27 years on past discussions. I have grave concerns that as a newly appointed regional chair, he is unilaterally managing this recommendation and request with no consultation with his regional council, and not intending to provide a solution that is best for Niagara, the residents he is serving. Instead, he's expecting the province to decide for us, and is very concerning. I find that very concerning. As residents, you have a voice, and I would highly encourage you to watch the Fort Erie Council on YouTube, starting at the 1 hour and 19-minute starting point, and it goes until the 2 hour and 45-minute ending point. I believe there's zero transparency in his process, and he's very clearly stated that there will be no consultation on his part about the decisions. Although the intentions of why he is pursuing this direction is about you, the residents, he does not explain the length of time a fulsome process would take, nor the amount of money it would take to execute something that's for you, the taxpayer. He can't document the benefits prior to amalgamation, benefits or savings prior to amalgamation in other areas that they've seen. So I'm really encouraging people not to sit back and to let the province decide our outcome. I don't want to let our beautiful city be engulfed by a larger entity, and if that was to happen, we would definitely lose our voice. We will have lost everything that the city has built, and we will lose our unique identity, which I don't think anybody wants to do. So to the mayor's point, you can reach out. I encourage you to reach out to Bob Gale at niagararegion.ca. You can also send emails to me, and I can pass them along as well. And this is big, and I don't think people really fully understand. And I would encourage you to go to the city's website and read what's been posted there as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Aquilina. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. I don't want to walk over a lot of the things that Councillor Aquilina has eloquently suggested. I did, though, want to let the people in Port Colborne know that since this has come out, the mayor, the CAO, while on vacation, communicating, the weekend, the comm staff, everybody here is working to get information out to meet the deadlines. And in a time when our country is under attack, it seems that now our city is. And so we really need a team Port Colborne approach. I'm very confident that what's happening here at City Hall and with this staff is foot to the floor, do everything we can. But we really need the citizens of Port Colborne to stand up, to look into this. It's very easy for people to look at this issue and say, well, you know, you got some high water bills. And so give somebody else a chance to see if they can do better. It's real easy to say, well, you know, if you ask 10 people on the street, should there be less politicians? 10 will say yes. But that's not the real story. I mean, we could come down and the province could say, well, cut all your politicians in half and leave us alone, but they're not. And so at the end of the day, all we've got is each other. And so we really need people to pay attention here to what's going on. And the stuff that's going to be put on the website won't be spin, they'll just be facts. And they'll disclaim all the rhetoric that talks about the savings and why it will be better. I think if we're not talking about this in the store, in the coffee shop, if you're not calling us, if we're not knocking at your door maybe with a flyer and explaining this thing, it's going to lose momentum. And there's only one shot at this. I've been around long enough to see this raised, and many of you in this room and watching, 3 or 4 times. This time it's for real. And the fact that it's coming from the regional chair with no consultation in a short period of time should worry all of us greatly. And at the end of the day, this is that shot that we've got to do well. And I assure you that I want to thank the mayor, CAO, and all of this staff for doing what they've done. It's a reminder, though, at the end of the day that sometimes being right isn't enough. And I think it's got to start coming from the people, and that's either to Mr. Gale, to the province. But we've all got to mobilize right now because, you know, this is our history. This is our legacy. And I'd hate us to be called something else next week or next month. And I'm sure a lot of people in 1969 and 68 went through this when there became 12, and you still hear about it today. And whilst people talk about Meriton and Ostrahan's Corners and Bethel and everything, there is still, all these years later, that resentment of a lost heritage, of a lost life and community. And so it's time we got to do better than they did in 69. It's time we got to fight this together. And so I hope all of you will be engaged, contact us, and do whatever you can with your neighbor to dispel I think the rhetoric that's going to be spun on this. And I think we can do this with the help of others, but it's time to get serious right now. So I just encourage the citizens to get involved. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. Anything further? Great. Councilor Badaway.
Well, it's not a fun discussion to have, I'll tell you that. Yeah, it's almost like deja vu all over again. In the city of Port Colborne, I know in my former lives, sitting in that seat, and sitting in that seat, and even up in Ottawa, sitting as an MP, and now as a regional councillor, it just continues to be a constant fight under attack, as Councillor Bruno stated, whether it be our hospital, whether it be our police attachment, and whether it be the city of Port Colborne in its own right. We figured, or we continue year after year, decade after decade, to have the same fight. I know, Councillor Bodner, when you were sitting in that chair, you had it. Those before me and after me, Bill, yourself, it's just very frustrating. So you get beside yourself, as Councillor Aquilina stated. You know, you try to search, soul search, and it comes to the point where you want to lose your you know what, but you got to keep your wits about you and ensure that as we move forward, we do it with credibility, and we do it with strategy, and we do it with hope that the right decision will be made based on the best interests of those that we all represent. This is not at all, and should not at all, be about politics. You know, as we sit in chambers, as we sit in not only municipal chambers, regional chambers, provincial, federal chambers, we all have to understand and respect the seats that we sit in and ensure that we're fighting for better business in government, not better politics in government. And I worry often that when we have upper levels of government, especially, who are supposed to work with us, that aren't, that they're concentrating more on the business of politics versus the business of government. And going to the mayor's comments earlier, that's exactly what we should be concentrating on moving forward, is being better at the business of government. I'm pretty well going on my 30th year in public office. City councillor, mayor, regional councillor, member of parliament, and I've seen a lot. I'm not going to say I've seen it all, but I've seen a lot. And we've been through a lot together here in the city of Port Colborne. And we've been through this fight before. Ron, you remember, you know, back in your day, and Dave and Bill and Gary, and now all of you that are sitting on these seats for the past few years. We've done the pro formas. We've done the numbers. We've seen communities that went through this in the past, like Ottawa and Hamilton, who still today are feeling the pain. They're still feeling the costs. They're trying to recognize the costs that they were told they were going to save and aren't. Amalgamation is not the answer. So let's get a bit more granular. Let's look at the reality of who we are here in this region. Niagara is a world-class destination, precisely because of our diversity. Its distinct communities, strong local identities, and the unique strengths each and every municipality brings to the table is what makes us that world-class destination. Now, we have one person, and in my view, driven by another, that are trying to rip that apart. Literally, rip it apart. Generations of work, of passion, of commitment, of loyalty, taken away from us. From Port Colborne to Grimsby, from Welland to Niagara Falls, our communities are not identical. And they should not be treated as though they are. That's Niagara. That's who we are. Niagara's success only partially comes from uniformity. It largely comes from being proudly local, collaborative, and dynamic. There's not many places in this country that have what we have. 12 well-functioning municipalities, each with its own priorities, economic drivers, infrastructure realities, growth pressures. This all forms the backbone of this region, of Niagara. That diversity is not a weakness. It's not at all a weakness. It is our defining strength. Again, that's what makes Niagara. That's our brand. It's not just all that water going over that big cliff. Look around us. That's Niagara. Amalgamation risks diluting those strengths. It would centralize decision-making. It would blur local identities and push governance farther away from the residents it affects most. That's the reality. That's what Ottawa continues to go through. That's what Hamilton continues to go through. A single consolidated structure cannot possibly understand neighborhood levels, neighborhood needs, better than the councils elected to serve them. You. Ron, you know what's going on in Gasline, don't you? That's the premier where Gasline is. Dave, what's happening at the Baptist church next to you? That's the premier of that question. Eric, what's happening in the southern east side area right now? Mark, what's happening down on the lakefront right now with the weather? What's going on in Eagle Marsh Drain right now? With the water levels and the ice? You know. Ask the Premier that question. It's our identities, local decision-making. It's you. A single, consolidated structure cannot possibly understand those levels better than you can. Those needs, what's happening in our communities. Local representation matters. Community accountability matters. Every upper level of government sometimes operates as though it stands above the rest. No, not at all. Municipalities are not subsidiaries of the province. They are democratic governments, and they're, in your own right, accountable to the residents. The appointment of Bob Gale as regional chair by Doug Ford has intensified concerns because it connects a top-down governance agenda to a structural overhaul that would fundamentally rip this region apart. Tear the Niagara brand, of which was built over generations. But let me be clear. Let me be very clear. The regional chair does not govern the 12 municipalities. He does not supersede locally elected councils. He does not speak unilaterally for the cities and towns that make up Niagara. He does not speak for regional council unless by resolution. Bob Gale speaks for Bob Gale. If there are governance concerns, the first responsibility is to ensure the region itself is operating effectively, transparently, and efficiently. Before even speaking about dismantling 12 functioning municipalities, the focus should be on cleaning up regional governments and administrative challenges and ensuring fiscal accountability at that level, period. Amalgamation does not guarantee cost savings. Across Ontario, forced consolidations have often led to larger bureaucracies, wage harmonization at the highest levels, pressures because of that, transition costs, disentanglement, and service disruptions. Look what happened in 2000 when we became the Niagara Health System versus the governance structures we had in place then. Look what happened with many other consolidations that happened not only in the public sector, but in the private sector. Let's talk about business and ensure that the business of government is our #1 priority. Bigger government is not automatically better government. And make no mistake about it, that's what they're proposing. Bigger government, hiding behind the words smaller government. That said, governance can and should evolve, as the mayor alluded to. No doubt. It's 2026. We get that. Smart modernization, streamlining where appropriate, strengthening shared services, speaking about municipal infrastructure and service corporations, as the city of Port Colborne is in fact doing. Strengthening shared services. Reviewing regional council structure, improving asset management, eliminating duplication. This is a responsible conversation to have. Dismantling 12 municipalities is not. So, where do we go from here? I commend you, Mayor, and your CAO, and this council, because you're already doing it, and you're doing it well. the team here, sitting to my left, and some of the residents that we have back here behind me. The city of Port Colborne gets it, always has, always will. And I commend you for that. But where do we go from here? Where we go is we lead by example. We take what you're already doing, and I say we, because it is, as Councillor Bruno stated, an all-hands-on-deck approach. A Team Port Colborne, Team Niagara, quite frankly, approach. 1, a formal resolution to the province. Each of the 12 municipalities should pass a resolution affirming that the regional chair speaks for himself unless expressly directed by regional council and does not speak on behalf of anyone or all of the 12 municipalities. Once again, period. 2, initiate a regional service and operation review. As I mentioned during the budget deliberations 2 weeks ago, Bill, launch an independent, transparent service delivery and operational review of regional government to identify efficiencies, cost controls, and governance improvements before any structural consolidation is considered. And with that said, does Niagara actually need a regional government? 3, affirm municipal autonomy. Publicly affirm the decisions of the magnitude must be shaped by residents, businesses, and local councils, not imposed from the top down. Lastly, most importantly, is individual municipal declarations. Each of the 12 municipalities should articulate its own position and intentions, as the mayor did earlier, clearly and publicly, ensuring residents understand where their local councils stand, but most importantly, why. We all understand what the what is, but how are we going to get there? Once again, you're already doing it. Let's do it closer together with our neighbors. In conclusion, Niagara's brand, once again, built by generations. Mark, your father, going back to the 60s, was part of one of those generations. Look on that wall. Look on the walls of all the chambers. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the Niagara brand. Don't rip it apart. This was, in fact, built over generations and is rooted in local pride, distinct identities, and accountable leadership. Not shooting from the hip with no information, no plan, no justification. The path forward is collaboration. The path forward is fiscal responsibility based on that collaboration, not forced amalgamation. Let's turn that page. The 12 communities must stand strong, speak clearly, and defend the democratic voice of our residents. Again, period. Niagara's future should be decided here in Niagara, not dictated from above. We have some work to do. We've done it before, and I believe we're all prepared to do it again. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Badaway. Questions? Great, thanks, Nance. We're on to our consent agenda. I've had Councillor Bagu, he's lifted item 11.3A, which will be considered as item 12.3. Councillor Bruno and Councillor Bagu have both lifted items 11.3C, which will be considered as item 12.4. Are there any other items that any councillor wants to lift? Okay, if I could have Councillors Bagu and Bruno move, the council hereby approves the listed consent items on the February 24th, 2026 council agenda, and that the consent items be approved on the recommendations as contained therein. All those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. Now on to items requiring separate discussion. The first item is 12.1, the Nickel Beach Report 2026-19. We have Luke Rowe here this evening, who will do a presentation on the Nickel Beach. Luke, come on up.
Okay, good evening, Mayor Steele and Council. My colleague Kennedy Stock and I are pleased to present our annual report on Nickel Beach. Okay, this slide provides just an overview of the topics we're going to go over today with this presentation. This slide shows an overview of the additions to programming and amenities that have occurred at Nickel Beach since 2024. The main driver for the implementation of new programming and service enhancements is feedback that we get from our visitors, our tenants, data collected from our seasonal staff, and data from our parking software. Some of the most impactful service enhancements would include the delineated walkway that we constructed from Zone 2 parking lot to Zone 1, which you can see in the image on the slide, and the addition of hourly parking in our hybrid parking model. In 2026, the focus is to improve the overall beach experience for our visitors, but particularly to find ways to bring more traffic to the beach during our non-peak times. Beach volleyball nets are contingent on the approval of the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. We're currently working through the logistics on that. As for shoulder season parking rates, our shoulder season at the beach run from opening to June 15th, and then again from Labor Day weekend to Thanksgiving. We are adding all-day hourly parking to all of our zones during this time. Last year, we averaged less than 3 passes per day in our Zone 1 parking lot. Often Zone 1 would sit empty as folks would prefer to pay the cheaper rates in Zone 2, and it would often anger folks to see that parking lot sitting empty when, not too many folks were using it. So we think adding in the hourly parking rates will give us some benefit. Splashtown Niagara has been a great partner for the city and offers an exceptional recreation experience at Nickel Beach. In 2025, Splashtown's operating season consisted of 59 days, and in total they sold 891 passes, a mix between 2-hour passes, full-day passes, and group passes. Splashtown hosts an event in support of a charity annually. In 2025, the event was dedicated to Big Brothers Big Sisters, and they raised enough funds for 3 new Big Brother Big Sister matches. In 2026, they are going to host 2 charitable events, one again in support of Big Brothers Big Sisters and one in support of Port Cares. This chart compares beach revenues from 2023 to 2025. So this would be the 3 seasons since we've had no parking on the beach itself. So you will notice Zone 1 parking decreased quite a lot after 2023. That is a result of the construction of the delineated pathway that I mentioned earlier. We had to take 26 parking spaces out of the Zone 1 inventory in order to accommodate that. And it was done out of a concern for safety, having folks parking on a street while walking also to the beachfront. Our seasons pass revenue peaked in our first season since having cars on the beach. The seasons passes typically gear more towards a passive user, folks who want to use the beach a lot for shorter periods of time. Now that we have the hybrid parking model and hourly options, we've seen those numbers go down, and I would expect that to continue to be the case as there isn't as much of a need for it. And as you can see, our parking revenue in Zone 2 and 3 was significantly higher this year, and that can be attributed to a combination of hourly parking, increased attendance, and very favorable weather conditions this season. So it might be difficult for you to see all the numbers on here, but this chart shows the average spend per customer for each visit to the beach. So the left side of the chart shows monthly that stat monthly in 2024, and the right side shows the monthly for 2025. So, for example, in May of 2024, the average spend per customer was $40.87 versus $21.40 in May of 2025. In August of 2024, the average spend per customer was $34.84 versus $26 in August of 2025. So this trend can likely be related directly to having the hourly parking option. Coming to Nickel Beach made more sense for people who have, for passive use, dog walkers, folks out for walks, sightseeing. Also for people who might be in a situation like myself with 2 young kids where you can't spend more than 2 hours at a place because you have to get back for nap time. Yeah, both, maybe. And this graph also just sort of highlights our revenues, but also compares it to monthly. So the key takeaway here is that July and August are very clearly our peak months. Our busiest day at Nickel Beach last year in 2025 was the Sunday of Canal Days, and we actually had more folks purchase a Zone 3 parking pass that day than the entirety of the season combined. So it just kind of speaks to the level of attendance we had this past beach season. And we sold more than double the amount of parking passes in 2025 compared to 2024.
Good evening, everyone. So this is our graphics from the year at Nickel Beach. Several takeaways from this are the record high honk parking passes that were sold. 8,520 were sold this past season. Staff are also pleased to report that around 2,185 participate passes were used at the beach this year. This number was collected from seasonal staff who regularly counted and is not 100% accurate of the number of participate passes used at the beach. Due to the favorable weather conditions, we only had 14 days where the seaweed was reported as being in the red zone, which is great. And 30 parking tickets were issued by beach staff during the course of the summer, so lots of people did use honk. Here we go. Some user feedback that we collected from attendees this year, but our overall approach was using the Net Promoter Score as well as some short feedback that you can see on the screen. Overall, people were very happy to have the restroom facilities as they're really nice, and the foot washing station that was added this past season. But the biggest challenge continues to be the cost of parking and the distance from Zone 2 to the beach. Okay, as mentioned, we used Net Promoter Scores to understand who our promoters of the beach are, and these two slides, this slide and the following slide, show the Net Promoter questions from this year. As you can see, some of the questions have blue text underneath showing what the score was from the past Nickel Beach season and then the improved score this year. As you will see, all of the scores from this past season are improved from the 2024 season. Just give you a second to read that. And then on this side, this is the continuation of the Net Promoter Scores filled out by beach users, and this survey will be available for the 2026 season and be presented to council at the following beach report. Thank you.
Thank you. So Nickel Beach is the city's signature waterfront destination. In order for it to remain that way, we do need to take an active role in being stewards of that environment. So there was a number of initiatives that we took on last year. One being we have an invasive species of plant called Phragmites. This species is damaging to Ontario's biodiversity, wetlands, and beaches. There was a large cluster that was continuing to expand on the beachfront at Nickel Beach. So we worked with the invasive Phragmites control group, and they applied a herbicidal treatment that should ultimately kill it. they'll follow up with us again in the spring to make sure that it was fully remediated. Last year, we also installed a section of dune fencing on the western portion of the public beach. The purpose of this dune fencing is to stabilize the dunes and just continue to add sand and allow them to build up as they play an important part in the beachfront from an environmental perspective. We do plan to, we have to take this fencing down during the off season because the winter and fall conditions will damage it, but we do plan to install it again for this coming beach season, and we also plan to expand the footprint of it. And when we are implementing and doing projects like this, we always make sure that we are consulting with our environmental partners, being the ministry, the NPCA, environmental consultant, LCA Environmental. And Nickel Beach, it's a very large footprint, and we have staff on site that do regular checks and litter picking up, but it is quite a lot to get your eyes on the entire beachfront, and there's lots of small pieces of litter that people leave behind, straws from drinks, forks, cutlery, things like that. So, our staff do a very good job in cleaning that up, but we want to implement some signage that will just kind of hopefully encourage folks to take some of that responsibility on themselves to, with the concept of leave as minimal of a trace as you can and to clean up after yourself. So, and that is the conclusion of our presentation. So if anyone has any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Great, thanks, guys. Councillor Aquilina.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you to both the presenters today. I'm under the understanding that Mabel's ice cream was a great success last year, and so I think having another food vendor there is probably a good thing. And I appreciate the report and what it entailed, and it's good to see that the numbers have gone up. But I did bring this up to our CAO a while ago, and it's in regards to parking, but parking specifically in the accessible spots. I think there was a mechanism in the honk app that people could park in or reserve a parking spot in an accessible parking place, but not actually have the requirements for accessible parking. And I was struggling a little bit with the fines that went along with that, because I don't think it really discourages people from parking. So it's just something I just want to reiterate and maybe have further discussions before we open up the next season going forward. That's
Okay.
all. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Excellent job on the presentation. I really think that you guys are struck with having one of the hardest jobs in the municipality. I've had experiences with beaches, and I think I would rather be a farmer than what you're doing in terms of risk. I mean, you have no control over the weather, you have no control over seaweed, and yet you're there trying to provide the best product at the least cost to the city. And so the fact that if I look back when I was a kid and what was there and the condition of the beach, and I look at it during the peak in COVID when it was rampant with people and they would pay anything because of that, to now being a very organized, controlled center. If you look at every aspect from a beautification point of view, from a washroom point of view, from a value to be proud of as a city, for citizens who go there, 2,185. In some cases, that's vehicles, right?
Yes,
not just
exactly.
individuals.
Vehicles, yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of people to go to that beach that are Port Colborne centric, and we're paying for a third of it, so to speak, on our taxes. So kudos to you. I think the hardest thing for a councillor and the citizens to understand is 1 year it's going to rain more weekends than it's going to be nice. And you're going to come here and present numbers that are quite different from that. And I think it's important that the citizens express their feelings about wanting to have this asset at a rather minimal cost compared to the rest of our park. So kudos to you for putting this together, for each and every year Nickel Beach looking better, with also the Towler Foad issue, which I forgot that you have to deal with, the inability to do seaweed at certain times of the day. Like, it's a monumental task to make it good. So you've taken an uphill battle, and really proud as a councillor and a citizen for what Nickel Beach has become. My question perhaps isn't to you, it may be more to the CAO. We're undergoing a Parks and Recreation Master Plan. And I don't know if I could ask the CAO or Greg, who's ever overseeing that, is Nickel Beach going to be part of the Parks and Recreation Plan? And do we know to what extent that may happen, or what we're looking for out of the plan as it pertains to the Parks and Recreation Plan?
CAO?
Through the mayor to the councillor and council, a Parks and Rec master plan is in development right now. We've received what we call a background work from some consultants. Right now, the team's going to be spending the next couple of months making sure it's fully Port Colborneized, because this is one of the most important areas. It's the waterfront of the city of Port Colborne. And when you bring in the beach, Nickel Beach as well as Centennial are going to be keynote spots, we think, within that Parks and Rec master plan. From what we've seen so far, a lot of the feedback from the community is about access to the waterfront. So maybe longer answer than you wanted. You might have wanted just a yes. So yes.
Councillor Bruno.
Let's get this going. Thank you, Mr. Rand. That's it.
All set? Councillor Bagu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Kennedy, Luke. One question here. We put the new trail along Welland Street now, this late fall. It's all pavement's all there for the bicycles to make it easy trip up to Nickel Beach. Do we have adequate parking for all these bicycles, like within view of the attendees of the beach?
Luke?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bagu. So currently, no, we don't, but that's definitely something that we've discussed and is on our radar to get some more appropriate accommodations for folks that are going to be taking active transportation methods down to the beach. So yes, that will absolutely be on our plans once we get in full swing with the beach season.
Okay, thank you. And I guess it's not a question, it's more of a comment that our CEO has always pushed self-sustaining entities. I know our goal for the beach is to be self-sustaining without taxpayers' money. So thank you people for making a good try at it. And I think in a few years we will reach our goal and get ready to put a crown on your heads. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Further questions? Councillor Hoyle.
To the mayor, Luke, and my question is, well, what I'd like to see is that you're looking at adding more of movie mats, longer extensions. Is that going to go east to west for accessibility?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hoyle. Yes, so that is the plan. Currently, our Moby mats just go kind of north-south from the entrance to the beach to the water. So we purchased additional mats and we plan to run east-west so folks can get farther than just one section. With the use of the accessibility mats, they can travel a little bit farther down the beachfront to use those. So. Because
that was something that was brought up to me for the last 2 years and they wanted more accessibility. The other thing is, we have complaints about seaweed, but maybe a reminder on all the obstacles to the public right now, if you can, in a condensed form, what the obstacle is and why the seaweed sometimes builds up and we have certain things we have to wait for before we can clean them.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, as you mentioned, it is a challenge and it's a part of life on the beachfront, right? Seaweed will be there no matter what, but we have timelines that we can do maintenance work like that. So 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. is when our maintenance work window is, and if the seaweed is in the water, we have no ability to take it out. So once it is on the shoreline and it is partly dried, we have to inspect it for toads, but then we can rake it up. We have to relocate it to another site on the facility to let it fully dry out, and then we can remove it. So oftentimes, our staff do a really good job of cleaning the seaweed that is washed up on the beachfront, but when it is in the water or partially in the water, according to our operations manual that was put together with the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, we have no ability to scoop that out of there. So last year was better than the previous year, but it's something we expect to deal with on an annual basis.
Counselor?
I thank you for that because no one believed me when I said it was toads.
Yeah.
Thank you, that's all. Sorry.
Thank you, Counselor. Further questions or comments? Counselor Berger.
Yeah, through your worship to Luke. I believe in your presentation you were mentioning that there's a parking lot that's underutilized. Which zone is that?
So that would be zone 3, we call it, but that's the extension into the residential area. So zone 1 is the closest lot to the beach. Zone 2 is a little bit farther away, a big gravel parking lot. And then what we call zone 3 is the extension into the residential area. So
what was the reason that you think it was underutilized?
Well, I think the comment in particular was it would, in 2024, it was outside of a couple days. It wasn't used at all. We didn't have the traffic to drive folks in there, but this year, we were getting into the zone 3 parking area almost every weekend. So I wouldn't say it was underutilized this past season. It has been in previous seasons, but it's something we're also aware of as vehicles are expanding into those areas. We want to make sure that, we have things like garbage bins in place in those areas, and we're keeping an eye on it with bylaw and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it would be important that we make sure that those parking lots are full before, people are using on-street parking, which can disrupt some of the residents that are there. And so to take as many cars off the street as possible would be preferred.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you, Counselor. Further questions? Okay. So if I could have Councilors Hoyle and Beauregard move that Recreation and Tourism Department Report 2026-19 be received for information. All those in favor? That's carried. Item 12.2, Partners for Climate Protection Program and Corporate Climate Action Plan, Report 2026-28. We have a presentation from staff. We have Samantha Morris, Supervisor of Environmental Compliance. Samantha, take it away.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm here tonight with Will Wright from Walter Feedy Group to present on an update on reducing corporate greenhouse gas emissions in the city. To give you a quick overview of what we'll be talking about tonight, I will give a quick overview of why we're here, and then an overview of the Partners for Climate Protection Program, and then Will be coming up to talk about the Corporate Climate Action Plan that was attached to this report, and emissions target recommendations too. So in 2023, you approved a target in the strategic plan to reach net zero by 2040 through reduced greenhouse gas emissions and improved energy efficiency. I was directed to figure out how do we get there. So last year we entered a shared service agreement with 6 other local area municipalities to explore joining the Partners for Climate Protection Program and developing a corporate climate action plan for the city. We have worked together with Walter Feedy Group and these other municipalities to develop this, which has been presented in the attachments to this report. You'll see in a few slides that we are proposing an update to the measure that was suggested in the strategic plan goal for reducing the emissions targets by 2040 and adjusting that. And so we will speak to that as well and answer any questions you have about that. This plan was reviewed and endorsed by the Environmental Advisory Committee a few weeks ago, and thank you to them for reviewing this for us as well. And I'm also pleased to let you know that half of the cost of developing this plan was covered by a grant as well. Hey, Jess, could you forward that slide for me, please? Or somebody? Thank you. So I did want to give a quick background on and an overview of the Partners for Climate Protection program that we are proposing that the city join. So this is a free program that's available to Canadian municipalities. It's nationally recognized framework to help municipalities take climate action. It provides technical guidance, standardized methodologies, and peer support to help municipalities reduce greenhouse gas emissions through a structured 5-milestone framework that's outlined here. There are currently over 500 municipalities participating in this program from across Canada in every province and territory. About 70% of the Canadian population is represented by these cities that are participating. So the 5 milestones, as you can see here, one is creating an inventory, which we have presented in the appendix tonight. Number 2 is setting a target. 3, develop a plan, then implement the plan, and then monitor and continually improve on what we're doing in taking climate action. So we have attached a report for milestone 1 and a report for milestone 3. And tonight we're here to get your thoughts on and your recommendations for setting a target, whether that's keep where we're at or adjust the target. I also do want to mention that you may have seen other municipalities across Canada have community climate action plans. Tonight we're here to present a corporate climate plan that focuses on corporate operations, not the broader community. So I did want to clarify that just so that you know there is a difference here. I did also want to mention our energy conservation demand management plan and the corporate climate action plan's alignment with this plan. This was approved in 2024 under Ontario Regulation 2523, which requires us to have an energy conservation demand and management plan. It includes city facilities. So in our ECDM currently we have 15 facilities that we report on annually to the government, and then we need to update this ECDM plan every 5 years. That's a regulation. So the corporate climate action plan includes the facilities that are in this this plan, and then expands beyond that to include anything that we pay a hydro bill, a gas bill, or a fuel bill for. So it includes all of our fleet and facilities. It includes anything that we're paying for. Beyond being a leader in climate action, there are many benefits to joining this program, and I've outlined a few of them here. So one of the major ones is making our operations more efficient to reduce utility costs and fuel costs for the city. Less reliance on outside resources as well is one of the goals, and so being a more resilient community moving forward. It does align with the regulatory compliance that I mentioned in the previous slide, and it also sets a regular reporting cycle for greenhouse gas emissions that will hold us accountable in a different way every 2 years. So we'll talk about that in a minute as well. It will qualify us for different funding opportunities through the FCM and their Green Municipal Fund specifically. And it will give us access to a network of other municipalities across Canada that are doing similar work, and share that with the members. FCM also provides resources for members to support the work that we're doing through this program. If the city tonight decides to sign up for the Partners for Climate Protection Program, the first step will be passing a resolution through council, which has been added to this report tonight. We'll need to assign a councillor and a staff member, so myself and one of you, as key contacts for the program. We will be committing to moving through the 5 milestones that I had mentioned in the previous slide within a 10-year period. The good news is if we do agree to this tonight and it's approved, we're done milestones 1 to 3 already. and that we will report on progress at least once every 2 years with support from the FCM, and actively participate in the program activities and share experiences with other network members. So I'm going to, the other thing is these lovely little icons, we'll be able to add them to our website to show people where we're at in the framework. So I'm going to pass this over to Will, who will go over the reports and scenarios proposed in milestone 2.
Okay. So thank you, Sam, for kicking us off, and thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for having me here tonight. So I'm Will. I'm an energy analyst and project manager with Walter Fady. We're a multidisciplinary engineering and architectural design firm. And myself and my team over the past few months have been developing the corporate climate action plan, a few highlights of which I will present to you tonight. So there's just a couple slides discussing some background of the program that Sam's already gotten into. So I'll just jump into some of the content here. So Sam touched on milestone 1 of this exercise was to evaluate the GHG emissions as they stand. We collected utility data from a variety of corporate sectors that you can see here. So buildings and facilities, fleet vehicles, corporate solid waste, streetlights, traffic signals, and water and wastewater. And as you can see, buildings and facilities make up about half, fleet vehicles are about a third, and then most of the remaining chunk is built up by solid waste, and then very little impact from streetlights and water. This is a pretty typical breakdown with buildings and facilities making up the bulk of emissions. And what this inventory does is it allows us to identify where the most efforts should be spent within these sectors, and what measures should be prioritized to reduce emissions. So naturally, buildings and facilities have the most potential to do so, not so much in the streetlights and traffic signals and water and wastewater, as they contribute such a little amount. So we decided to go with a 3-scenario approach for mitigating GHG emissions. The benefits of doing this, so we've gone through and analyzed three different scenarios and 3 different timelines for GHG reductions to kind of give us the most information in order to make a recommendation, and for you to have the most information as possible to adopt a resolution. So we kind of have 3 different tiers here, all of which are intended to align with regional targets, federal targets, and recommendations from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So starting with what we're calling a most aggressive target, this was intended to achieve net zero by 2040, achieve 50% reduction by 2035, and 18% reduction by 2028. The 2040 target, which of course aligns with the current target for Port Colborne. Next, we have what we're calling our most aligned. So this is intended to be the most aligned with federal targets, regional targets, and what's recommended by the IPCC. This is net zero by 2050, 40% by 2035, 18% by 2028. And then what we're calling our most achievable, which puts more emphasis on long-term targets, and it leaves a little bit of flexibility with that 2050 target, reaching 80% and then reaching 100% net zero through carbon offsets. So in terms of measures on how to get there, we analyzed a long list of measures across all different sectors, and I'll just do kind of a quick overview here, looking mostly at buildings and facilities because that's where most of the opportunity lies. So first of all, we recommend conducting energy audits at the major facilities in Port Colborne, we've identified in the report the biggest emitters. So conducting energy audits to gain a better understanding of the existing systems, triaging measures, just getting a better idea of what can be done. And this includes things like various electrification measures, so converting any natural gas-fired equipment to electric, air source heat pumps, optimizing existing systems, converting lighting to LED, and solar PV generation. And this is just a a small amount in a variety of measures that we recommend and that we've provided analysis for. So next, I'll get into some of the scenario analysis. So basically, we've taken all these different measures and we have analyzed the impacts of implementing those measures in order to meet the 3 different scenario targets that I outlined previously. So just a bit of background in this image. So the different colors here represent different fuel sources, which come from the utility data and consumption data that we gathered in milestone 1. So what we see here is a timeline from present day out until 2050, this being our most aggressive scenario. So you can see we're hitting that 18% target by 2028, 50% by 2035, and net zero by 2040. These kind of negative bars here being carbon offsets, making up the difference, and kind of offsetting any existing, or not existing, any remaining GHG emissions coming from the electricity grid. I will also note that each of these plots considers both projected population growth and how corporate emissions will increase proportionally to population growth, as well as projections for the amount of GHG emissions produced on average through the provincial electricity grid. So next, similarly, we have our most aligned scenarios. Again, this shows that 2028 target, 40% reduction by 2035, and then reaching net zero by 2050. And then finally, what we're calling a most achievable target, which has that 2035 target of 40% reduction, and then reaching 80%, more or less 80% by 2050, and then net zero through carbon offsets. I'll note that for this scenario, we decided to omit any electrification of heavy vehicles, that measure tends to be the most controversial. It's the most, has the biggest price tag, and the technology isn't necessarily as readily available. So in terms of our measure triaging, that was the first one to go. So this table shows kind of a financial and energy analysis between the 3 different scenarios. A couple things that I want to highlight, pros and cons between the 3. And before I do so, I'll just note how this table is separated. So the first 2 lines here are final year. So in 2050, what are the annual utility costs, energy impacts? The next 3 lines there are cumulative. So from present day, those are annual sums every year from present day to 2050. And then finally, we have a net present value, which provides a more robust and apples to apples comparison financially between the different scenarios. We also looked at business as planned. So based on what we're recommending, what would the alternative be? Kind of business as usual, not considering any green alternatives, to give a better apples to apples comparison. So yeah, a couple highlights and pros and cons. The most aggressive scenario minimizes the need for carbon offsets and will result in the least amount of cumulative GHG emissions. However, this will incur significant immediate expenses. Another positive will have the least final year utility costs due to complete electrification. And then again, financially, a drawback is it will have the highest net present value. What we're calling a most aligned scenario, again, minimal carbon offsets, especially compared to the most achievable scenario. Better net present value, more financially attractive than the most aggressive. And the elongated timeline will theoretically allow for better advancements in technology. And then finally, our most achievable will have the lowest project cost, lowest NPV, but drawbacks will have the highest cumulative GHG emissions and the highest final year utility costs due to the continued combustion of fossil fuels for heavy fleet vehicles. I will note on the most achievable target that it's still quite aggressive and is aligned with the recommendations from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So even though it is the least aggressive of what we're seeing here, it is still definitely in line with the goals of the PCP program. I believe that is all I had. So I think at this point we'll open it up to questions.
Great, thanks, guys. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Could you go back to the slide that talked about all the percentages?
The targets.
Before that, yes.
This one.
Keep going. It's about,
this
there we
one.
go. Okay. So I look at that thing and I'm going to tell you, you had me supporting this thing until you talked about, and I saw some members of the gallery wince at it, when you talked about the controversy around vehicles and their electrification and the controversy around them, words to that effect you used. Is that correct?
Specifically heavy vehicles. Okay. Heavy vehicles, the market isn't as readily available as light duty vehicles. Light duty vehicles are absolutely considered in all these scenarios. It's specifically heavy, so I just wanted to make that clear.
So I just wonder, like, if you're a producer of heavy vehicles, your sales pitch is my machine emits less and we've updated our technology, and I think that's a good thing. And when we have heavy vehicles in our fleet, I'm assuming you're talking about excavators and things like that, to take them out, I mean, you know, we would do electric vehicles to save both money and greenhouse gases. And now we're taking one aspect of it and we're saying, well, we're not going to count that. And I don't know yet. I look at the chart and I see what vehicles are. And again, I don't know what percentage our heavy vehicles would contribute to that. But I look at like streetlights and traffic signals. Well, you know, Ontario's electrical generation is mostly all green. Mm-hmm. It has some natural gas in there. So, I mean, other than going to a utility and say, I could be spending a lot of money to save 2% because pure green electricity might cost more than what's coming out from Ontario Hydro. And same under water and wastewater. You know, the percentage of GHG is really not in our control. It's the fuel we buy, and the fuel we buy is electricity. In Ontario, that's pretty much all green. So I guess there's no dollar amounts assigned to any of this stuff. So I don't know what it takes to achieve that. And yet I want to enter into a 10-year plan that I have no idea what it costs. You're taking out you're eliminating one source that I think we should be encouraging manufacturers, and we should be leading by example in green. And so I'm not a big fan that you took that out, and I think that streetlights and traffic signals, water and wastewater, very difficult for us to eliminate that at all. So I'm kind of questioning that we're down to sort of three things, and the second one doesn't include everything that emits GHG. So I don't know if you can comment on that, but I want to support this. I think obviously it's a noble cause. I have no idea what it will cost to achieve it. And maybe that's the next step, but I need more enlightenment.
So before you guys give a response, the CAO needs some clarification.
Just to the councillor, and maybe to the presenters, because when I was hearing your question, I started thinking about something too. So when you have the three models, in those models, you've come up with a way to achieve 50%, 80%, and 100%. And when you did that, I think you did that by saying sometimes there's technologies that's available to help you get there and sometimes there's not. So when I heard you talk about the large vehicles as being, maybe the technology's not there, you took the approach that if it gets there, it's going to be a bonus. But right now, the path that you designed for us was that we wouldn't replace it because you don't know when that's going to be there. So it's not that your presentation is saying that we would not move heavy vehicles to electric one day. And that might create a new opportunity to do something more efficient or that. It's just that in the line of sight that you have for planning for this report, you really can't predict something that's unknown. And I don't know if that's kind of what the counselor was asking for. It was, how do you reconcile the fact that there might be other technologies down the road that would get us there? And is that just going to be a bonus in your plan down the road? Or, and should we be very clear that we'd be willing to look at other options to get there as well? I don't know, Counselor, if that's kind of what you were talking about or what?
It is, but to that extent, if you've got 29% comes from fleet, you have to know what the fleet's greenhouse gas generation is. And so does that mean you went around and looked at how many heavy vehicles we have and you didn't count them in the first place? So they're not in there. Because if you'd have counted them, fleet might have been 31% or 35%. If you took them out from the get-go, then you've got 100%. You're trying to quantify everything to make up 100. So is fleet in there with the heavy vehicles? So all of them generate 29% of your overall goal?
Go ahead.
But yet if we bought something to replace that, it wouldn't count.
Let's get an answer here, Counselor.
Okay.
Go ahead.
The answer.
Okay, so yeah, a lot of good discussion there. I'm going to do my best to capture everything that you brought up. Okay, so the note on taking out heavy vehicles. So it's important to recognize in these scenarios, this is not, the way that we're presenting them tonight is not necessarily we're saying this is exactly what you need to do to hit these targets. These are to give you an idea of what you can do and what it would cost in terms of order of magnitude to hit these targets. So for this scenario, we wanted to analyze what would it look like if we were to hit 80%, more or less, call it 75 by 2050, based on conversations we've had with stakeholders, based on the equipment that is readily available and the cost of like dollar value per ton of GHG removed. Heavy vehicles made the most sense to remove when we're looking at this 80% goal. If we want to hit 100%, obviously we look at removing heavy vehicles. This isn't to say we don't recommend doing it. What we're saying here is that if you want to hit 80% and then offset the rest through tree planting, renewable energy credits, etc., it makes the most sense based on today's information to remove heavy vehicles, opposed to heat pumps, other building measures, etc. Does that clear that up?
Not really, but we keep saying cost, and I don't see any cost.
Yeah, so we've identified costs, and that was, so another point that you brought up was heavy vehicle inventory. So we collected utility data from the town, from different departments in the town, along with inventories, so light vehicles, medium vehicles, heavy vehicles. So we know to a certain degree what the inventory looks like and what departments and what vehicle types are emitting how much emissions. So like that table at the start that had the breakdown of the different sectors, there's a lot more work that goes into that, and to go into every different sector, every different asset that you have, it would be a much longer presentation. That information is available in the Milestone 1 report, where we break it down by, we break down fleet by sector, by vehicle type, by gasoline, diesel, etc. We have all that information. And then, so based on those inventories for vehicles, we were able to estimate cost of replacing. I don't know if we went to the level of detail of individual assets or if we had heavy vehicles and assumed heavy vehicles like based on a certain archetype. But basically, to give an order of magnitude, we estimated the cost of replacing those vehicles. And again, those cost estimates, there's a whole, like several pages of all these different measures that we're recommending, and that this is just the overview of the final result. A lot of math went into this. And yeah, again, we just wanted to show the high level results in order to, because for the purpose of adopting a target, not to go into the details of all the different financials.
Okay, Mr. Mayor. So in the plan, if it's fleet, if it's buildings, is there going to be a scale that says, well, if you want to cut your buildings, greenhouse gases, and it's $2 million, if you spend $1 million, you'll cut it. In other words, will the plan identify what the low-hanging fruit is, what you should do first, that kind of stuff?
Yes, to an extent. And yeah, so what we've tried to do is we've tried to identify and prioritize measures that have the biggest impact more immediately. So the biggest facilities, is it the Gale Center? Vale Center. Gale is Niagara Falls. The Vale Center is like by far. My apologies. So yeah, to hit these targets, and we mention this and stress it in the report, that the first thing that should be done is going to the Vale Center, conducting an energy audit to identify where the highest value measures are, and then we having not conducted that audit yet, we're kind of guessing based off of building archetypes for audits that we've done previously, and other measures that we've analyzed and recommended previously, how we would go about decarbonizing that facility. So yeah, those details are kind of more in the weeds of the report.
I guess because half of it is a grant and there's still further to come, I'll go along with it for now, but I'm expecting more fulsome numbers in the future.
Good. CAO?
Through the mayor, just to the team, the presenters, and not to continue the conversations, but just for clarity, what you're presenting here today is really about establishing a target. And what you're really trying to say is right now, City Council has established a very aggressive target at 2040. And what you've done is quite a bit of a review on the probabilities to be able to achieve it by 2040 or 2050, which is where other municipalities have moved their target to as well. And what you've accomplished is, if you've looked at all of the greenhouse gases for the whole city, so every asset, even the heavy trucks, are included in your numbers. And what you've tried to do is use the best available scientific information to come up with, without necessarily having every asset, but groups of assets, to say, you're going to be in this ballpark to accomplish that goal. So today is really about saying, and it's a difficult scenario, and we take council's direction, but there's a much higher cost because of where technology is today to get there by 2040 versus getting there by 2050. And if you move it out to 2050, you'll blend your cost over a much longer period of time. And as the next phase of this, there will be looking at a more detailed implementation plan of things that can be done. The great work of Public Works and our presenter here from on our side is they've been able to receive a grant from the Green Fund with FCM. And we're doing, can you remind me, 7 or 8 buildings?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to
7 buildings.
7
So,
buildings.
yeah, exactly. So that was something I was hoping to mention. Thanks to our facilities team in the crowd here. They've received this grant, and so they'll be doing a detailed feasibility study at 7 of the municipal buildings, including all the highest emitters of greenhouse gas emissions, to see exactly what are the steps that we need to take with the specific equipment that we have. So they'll be able to say, okay, now these are our actions, like our specific actions. The other thing that I did want to mention is that this is also adaptable, and so this reporting on a biannual basis, I will have this giant list that are in the appendices today in the reports, and be tracking and monitoring these to see, where are our bills now? Where are we from a carbon perspective from 2 years ago? And so this is setting this baseline, which you've already established that 2040 is the goal, putting 2024 data as the baseline, and how do we get there, as the CAO has said. So there are next steps and accountability as well by joining the program.
Okay, Councillor, you're set? Thank you. Questions down this end? Councillor Baggio.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the bottom line, Samantha, is you're recommending we do the 2050 most achievable one, and if something happens, we win a lottery or something in the city, we could change it to 2040.
Through the mayor to the councillor, sure. I don't know what lottery, other than just doing great work for the environment.
Maybe the provincial government to kick in extra money.
No, but for
Mr.
sure.
Mayor?
It doesn't mean that we will only go to 2050, and that is the only day that we can, on January 1st, 2050, this is the only day we can reach net zero. If we reach it before that, that's fantastic. That's a great news story. But I do recognize that there are lots of things that we need to pay for in the city to keep things going and update things. And so making this more achievable, I think it aligns with the goals of council and with the goals of staff as well.
To you, Mr. Mayor, Councilor Horn and I are both on the Environmental Advisory Committee as non-voting members, of course, and we had big discussions at our meeting regarding this, and it was unanimously approved by the committee, and I think it's great. Realistically, I know don't know how much it's going to cost, and that's always a hard thing. I watched the numbers on budget time, and it's hard. I know that.
Yeah, and if I may, through the mayor to you, councillor, these numbers, these total net values are estimates, but they do include things that we already will have to replace. So we know that things will need to be replaced, assets will need to be replaced, like furnaces, or, so it's integrating some of that data that we had access to and knowledge of at the moment, and thinking about, if we move forward with this, if we move forward with this plan, that we are considering the net zero goal in every decision that we're making with the city, but all of it will come to council every time.
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor, it's like we already switched our propane Zamboni to electric already.
That's right.
So we're ahead of the game there, and I'm glad you mentioned about when we replace normal things. This isn't anything out of the ordinary so far. So, Mr. Mayor, I highly recommend we adopt staff's recommendation to adopt the most achievable target. And I would gladly be volunteer as a signer up as a councillor, Mr. Mayor.
Funny, I had your name written down. I've got it
I had
right
to bring
here.
it forward. It's not written there.
Clerk can be the witness. It's written right here, councillor. Any further questions? So I'm going to have councillors Bagu and Dance move the Public Works Department Report 2026-28 respecting FCM ICLEI Partners for Climate Protection Program joining resolution be received. That the City of Port Colborne's participation in the FCM ICLEI Partners for Climate Protection Program be approved. That the Supervisor of Environmental Compliance for the City of Port Colborne and Councillor Bagu of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne be appointed to oversee the implementation of the Partners for Climate Protection Program milestones and serve as the primary points of contact for the city of Port Colborne. The mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the council resolution to join the FCM ICLEI Partners for Climate Protection Program attached here to as Appendix A. And the council adopt a revised corporation greenhouse gas GHG emissions reduction target, replacing previous corporate target to fulfill milestone 2 of the PCP program, and that corporate climate action plan attached here to as Appendix C be approved. Questions? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you, council. Thank you, staff. Next is item 12.3, our Brownfield Community Improvement Plan Tax Increment Grant with Development Charge Grant Agreement for 714 and 706 King Street, Report 2026-05. If I could have Councillors Elliott and Beauregard move that the Planning and Development Department Report 2026-05 be received, that the bylaw attached as Appendix B being a bylaw to enter into the agreement with Cornerstone Homes, Niagara Limited, Brandon Nagar for a tax increment-based grant with development charge grant in the Brownfield Community Improvement Project area under the Comprehensive Community Improvement Plan for 714 and 706 King Street be brought forward for council's approval. Questions? Councillor Baggio.
More of a comment, Mr. Mayor, if that's okay.
Yep.
This garage has been there for many years, old Art's Place, I guess, on King Street, it used to be called, and I'm really super happy to see this progressing to be some housing. And I thank the developer and the city for bringing this forward to council, and I definitely will go for it. My only one concern I do have, I drove by the site on the weekend, and where the hole was, where I guess where the tanks were, it's now partially filled with stone and lots of water, and the fencing that surrounds and protects the hole has been laying on the ground all winter. I just wonder if we can get bylaw or the developer to get out there and fix the fence before some kids go over there and get hurt maybe.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Berry, I'm happy to speak to the developer. I'll be speaking, once this report is approved, I'll actually be speaking to him tomorrow so we can finalize the paperwork to send it to the region. I'm happy to bring that to his attention. If it's not addressed in a short manner, I'm also happy to send bylaw by.
Thank you, Councillor. Further questions? All in favor? That's carried. Cool. 12.4, recommendation report for draft plan of subdivision. Approval for Mapleview subdivision file D12-01-24, 2026-29. If I could have Councillors Bruno and Danch move that the planning and development report 2026-29 be received. That the draft plan of subdivision and associated draft plan conditions attached as Appendix A to this report be approved. That the city clerk be directed to issue the notices of decision regarding the bylaws in accordance with the Planning Act. Questions? Councillor Bruno.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. This plan of subdivision has lots of debate, which it should have. It's quite large. Seems to me that from what I understand, the neighbors backing on to the Portal Village subdivision have been duly satisfied with what was the road allowance there, the distancing. There's a number of residents here who've been ongoing meeting who are in the sphere of influence of Mapleview, and those are the residents in Westport Gardens. Their concern, and I share those concerns, is that there is some concern that whether it's just the extension of 3rd Avenue into Mapleview, or if down the road there are other access and egress points along Kalali Street West, that poses a direct problem for those members leaving that subdivision going north, may use 3rd Avenue and the existing Westport Garden subdivision as a way to get to Main Street, in many cases a quicker way to get to Main Street. If you look at the surrounding areas, folks coming out of there would have to have a clear path to turn left on West Side Road. Then they're faced with a traffic light that they have to turn left on, so it's not as easy as a right-hand turn to get back to places like No Frills and onto Harvey's and all those businesses along there. So to that extent, there was discussions with the Director of Public Works and the Chief Planner, I understand, at a meeting here with residents last week. Talked to some of the residents in there. I've talked to particularly the Chief Planner and a couple of the residents as late as this afternoon to try and get some commitment that in the future, as that subdivision develops, the Third Avenue does not become a cut through, and like I think any proactive council would do, is look down the road, look where the puck's going, and see if we can't head off some things and give the residents the peace of mind in the meantime. So to that end, the Chief Planner has agreed to actually, I have a recommendation. It will probably be easier for me to say that, Mr. Mayor, than explain it, if I could. Move that the Chief Planner and Director of Public Works be directed to undertake a review of options to manage and control traffic on Third Avenue, including the potential closure of Third Avenue at Kalali Street West, and that the Chief Planner and Director of Public Works report back to Council with recommended options, associated timelines, and estimated costs by May of 2026. And so the planners assured me that they will do that. They understand the issues facing Third Avenue. And as an aside, it also affects people entering 650 Main Street because of the configuration of either a boulevard or some issues surrounding that entrance that might also make Third Avenue a cut through for other folks besides the large development at Mapleview Crescent. So with the agreement of planning and the director, I think we could establish something in the term of this council that will give them peace of mind going forward, and perhaps we could even, in that, will be a starting point or milestone. I think we've talked about.
So Councillor, before you keep going on here, you've put an amendment on the floor. I need a seconder to this, then you can speak to it. So you've moved it. Do you have a seconder?
Yes, Councillor
Danch. So I've moved by Councillors Bruno and Danch. This is the amendment, Councillors. It's up on the screen.
Yep.
So now you can comment on it, or comment or even ask questions.
No, just the last thing was in that discussion when the Chief Planner comes back, there'll be a milestone set with whatever they're going to do at Third Avenue, even if it's a closure. It will kick in at that time. There's no sense putting something there now while there's nothing built and slow down traffic in the meantime. So that's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Now, this is an amendment, Council, so are there any questions on the amendment to staff or to Councillor Bruno who brought it forward? Seeing none, you're voting on the amendment only. All those in favor? That's carried. Now we have the motion as amended is back on the floor. I had Councillors Bruno and Danch move that originally. Are there any questions on the original motion now as amended? Councillor.
Sorry, through your worship, just trying to understand that condition that was just put on. Sorry, is that once the review is done and there's some recommendation of some sort, what's the mechanism or avenue that's going to go forward from that recommendation?
Mr. Hatch?
Through the mayor to the councillor, it would be separate from the draft approval of the subdivision, but we may use some subsequent information. For example, if the developer, when they come in with a phasing plan, we may look at the information from that phasing plan to inform when certain decisions are made with respect to changes to Third Avenue. But the mechanism for it would be, perhaps I'll defer to Director of Public Works. When have we done traffic calming or stop and close? What have we used as a tool to put that in place in other streets in the city?
Mr. Shapowski.
Yes, through your worship. So what I would suggest is we'll probably, per our traffic calming policy, we end up talking to residents in the area. We really want to make sure that we understand what the full subdivision or streets actually need and require in that area. So I think we would start off in that zone there, get the feedback in, determine what we can do on some traffic calming measures, and then we would go from there. Again, implementation might not be right away because the need isn't going to be right away, but we'd have to establish those timelines of when they would be implemented. Maybe it's based off how many, homes are going in or how many permits are issued. Then there'd be a certain time that they're done, or a certain phase, we could say.
Is that, Councillor? Good, thank you. Further questions or comments? Okay, all in favor? That's carried. Just like to thank our citizens in the area that got involved with this, the ward councillors, and any other councillors that were involved in meetings, specifically our staff and our proponent. Thank you for listening to our citizens and our staff and getting this done. And let's get some houses built, gentlemen. Thank you. Now we're on to staff remarks. Madam Clerk, anything to add for this evening?
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Thank you. Chief?
Mr. Mayor, nothing.
Mr. Shapowski?
Yes, Your Worship. At the last council meeting, staff presented a report regarding the region's waste management contract renewal. And since this meeting, the region has actually notified the city that their Public Works Committee approved a recommendation to extend the current curbside waste collection contract to 2030. So that action is going to be presented to Regional Council this Thursday, and if it's approved, it will push the timeline back approximately 1 year. Staff are still planning to come back this year with a report to talk about the green cart switch out program, because that is able to be modified before that contract period. So we'll still be coming back with that, but I did want to let council know that there's the potential that that contract period may be altered for an additional year.
Yeah, thank you. Through the mayor. Work is continuing on the city's official plan, and sort of hot off the press this afternoon on the website, we have an official plan background report that is now online. It identifies key policy gaps and areas for consideration in the new official plan. Council residents, anyone interested is encouraged to review that. We've got an online feedback form on the website. So please take a look at that and let us know if you have any comments. We will be back with the consultant who's working on the official plan in front of council at the next meeting, March 24th. Or sorry, 2 meetings out, March 24th, to give you an update on where we are with engagement and where we are with progress on the plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Communications. Jasmine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, council will remember that during the 2026 budget process, funds for a new city website were approved. And I just wanted to provide a really quick update on that project, as it's going to be an exciting one for my team and interesting to residents and council as well. So just for a quick background, the website redesign project is required now because the system that we use to kind of power the back end of our current website is at the end of its life, and it won't be supported anymore past 2026. And so if we don't do anything, at some point we won't have a website, and we certainly don't want to be in that position. So we did go through an RFP process, and we received 26 submissions. I want to thank the staff team that joined me in reviewing each and every one of those RFP submissions. We did identify a successful vendor for the project. I'm happy to share that it's a great Canadian company with extensive experience working with municipalities. It's going to be a great resource for us to create a really useful and functional website for residents in Port Colborne. So we will be doing some, I'll tell you, the company is called Up and Up. I missed that part. It's important, Up and Up. Great. I'm really looking forward to working with them. So we will do some public consultation with the community just to identify if there's certain special things, features, or functionality that they would really like to see in our website. And we'll take feedback from the community. We'll also take advice from Up and Up to determine make sure that we have something really great to put forward. We'll do lots of updates in terms of accessibility, and also we'll look at every single page of content that we have to make sure that it's up to snuff, it's easy for residents to understand, it's in plain language, and it will work really well for everybody. So we're looking at a launch timeline of likely September of 2026, and there'll be lots more to come on this project going forward, but I just wanted to give you a little update.
Thanks, Jasmine. Mr. Jouep, anything from Recreation? Watch your head.
Yeah, to the mayor, just an update with our minor hockey associations. So both our Wave Girls Hockey and Port Colborne Minor Hockey Association, we had our local two tournaments hosted these past 2 weeks. And I just want to recognize all the volunteers who work with those associations, put in all the time to help put these tournaments together and pull groups from all over Ontario. I think there were counselors who were at the tournaments the past 2 weekends. So I just want to recognize the associations, all their efforts for that.
Don't forget the Golden Puck who put on the
Golden Puck, yeah.
Minor
the Mark Van Gool Memorial.
Colborne Minor Hockey Tournament.
Yeah.
Thanks, Greg. CAO.
Thank you, Mayor. Maybe just to add on to your comments, or just to maybe take a different perspective on your comments earlier today, is the city keeps running despite, I think, the conversation that's happening in the community and the conversation that has to happen. And I just wanted to reassure the community and council that staff have met and are committed to the goals that have been set for us, whether it be economic development, housing, developing east side lands and moving forward there, childcare, and most importantly on our minds, healthcare. There's healthcare committee coming up very shortly, and we look forward to continue moving that file forward. There's a lot still to do there, and we're very thankful, I think, for some of the work that's gone forward. And there will be quite a bit of discussion about community consultation on healthcare. I think you're going to find in the coming months as some of the information comes forward. The committee's been very active talking about establishing those final priorities for healthcare and bringing that forward to council. So these next 2 or 3 months are going to be very busy in healthcare, despite the new, I think, work we have in front of us from what's been announced recently. So just you got the staff's full commitment, and 100% thank you to the staff for stepping up and continuing to do what you do every single day.
Great, thank you. On to councillors' remarks. Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really don't have anything, but I have a question for Steve just on what he said tonight about the garbage. Will that affect anything with the Pleasant Beach area? Are we still active on that?
Through you, your worship. So we would recommend, if it does go through on Thursday, we would recommend waiting the extra year, just because we want to be speaking to the most current ownership of the area as well. So we don't want to do it too early, because it's also going to be a 2-year period until the contract's awarded as well. So what we would recommend is to skip that portion, because that's kind of out of the control for the immediate time frame. But the green card switch out program we do have control over that today, and we can make those decisions today. So we would recommend at least moving forward with reviewing that aspect of it.
Okay, and staff took care of everything that I had going on. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Hoyle.
Again, thank you, staff, for taking care of all my questions, so that when I come here, I'm pretty limited on talking much. Reminder that anyone who's really concerned about this amalgamation, all this other good stuff that's going on, please send us emails, call our councillors, get in touch with the mayor while he's still around, and make your voice please be heard.
Councillor Danch.
I'll leave you all alone this week. I had a couple talks with some directors, but we're good to go. Thank you.
Good stuff. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. Oh, I thought you were done. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
That was quick, wasn't it? Quick question to the manager of communications. Did we just source Canadian companies for the website?
Through the mayor, I'm going to ask the CAO to help me with that one.
So through the mayor to the councillor, there was a competitive process. I think there was, I don't know the exact number that bid and went through the process, but it was significant. Our manager of communications and the team spent many hours going through. I think the manager of communications just noted that it was a Canadian company.
That awarded, but I just wondered, do we have like a directive that whenever a purchasing directive, that when we're sourcing materials of any kind, that we look Canadian first? And if you definitely can't get a product or a piece of equipment or whatever, and it's not available in Canada, then go outside, but like, shouldn't we have a Canada first approach?
So through the mayor to the councillor and council, I don't mean to sound like a lawyer, because I definitely am not, but we follow all trade policies that are in front of us.
I'd rather see all Canada first and then source outside. So just asking. I'm glad it was a Canadian company that we picked. So just to support what the mayor said earlier about amalgamation. I like the city of Port Colborne. I don't want to be called anything else. This just seems to be the wrong thing at the wrong time. You're looking at an election in 8 months, and then a bomb gets dropped on everybody, and everybody's got that, that look on their face like, oh my gosh, what is happening here? Residents must be just concerned about, this is my home, this is my address, this is how everybody knows us. Everybody knows Canal Days is in Port Colborne, not another city. So stand up and fight. I'm thinking we're doing as much, if not more, than any other city in the region, probably a lot more than others. And that's assigned to this council, because if anybody says that things grind slowly because of politicians, really hasn't paid attention to what is going on in Port Colborne. And that's not only the people around this horseshoe, but the people that are sitting across from us and the rest of our staff that are working as hard, if not harder, than I've ever seen on my years on council to try to keep up with what we're assigning them. So if anybody thinks that we're just gonna turn over and play dead and say, go ahead, do what you wanna do. I don't wanna become the little brother to some big brother other city. I'd rather stay the city of Port Colborne, because everybody knows where we are. And I'll support the mayor in everything that he said in his statement. And if anybody's looking for information, look at the city's website. Go and take a look at the video from the town of Fort Erie's open house on what the chair of the region had to say and how he got caught a couple of times. And heck of a way to take over his chair, to come out and say, well, I've been thinking about it, and amalgamation sounds pretty good. So I'll say no to that 100 times over. So that's all my statements.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. Councillor Bruno.
I don't have any ward issues. I just wanted to add, for citizens out there who may have think, well, that's what happened in Fort Erie. When's he coming to Port Colborne? And when can we talk to him? He's already been here. And unfortunately, that wasn't on the agenda or the topic. And so his visit here is come and gone. But we'd welcome him back, I'm sure, to talk about this. Thank you.
Councillor Baggett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of things. I'd like to thank Director Steve I had a call him on Sunday. Apparently there was a fire hydrant on Windsor Drive in Hawthorne Heights that a tow truck backed into and broke it. Had a little water leakage there. And people were, just let Steve know, people were trying to call the on-call list number and they couldn't get through. It was hanging up on them. I think that somebody ended up calling 911. And of course, our fearless firefighters showed up and the police showed up. And then I called Steve when I got a call from my brother-in-law, whose house it was in front of. So thanks, Steve, for taking care of it. And maybe you can look into the mixed up with the on-call telephone that was hanging up on people. And second thing, before regional chair, what's his name now? Gail did what he just did. I did okay me going to the State of the Union address by him on Friday. I'm not that thrilled about going, Mr. Mayor, but I will go. Now I'm more curious to see what he's have to say for himself. So I will report back to council after that, Mr. Mayor. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Beauregard.
Thank you, through you. I just want to say thanks to Steve for helping out on the one item with that lid that was missing. So thank you for helping on that. And no, I concur with what council's been saying, what the mayor has said, and about this whole amalgamation talks. We are Port Colborne. Port Colborne's my home. Love it, and I don't want to see it change.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Aquilino.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to thank not only the mayor, but staff for having to pivot very quickly over the last few days and try to get a handle on the announcements that were made. And I just want to reiterate what's been said already, like for staff, you know, nothing's been said yet, nothing's been decided yet. And so I just hope that their worries kind of are eased a bit. I do have one question for Steve, and I don't know if you will have the information for me or not, but I can't remember if it was the beginning of January when notifications were sent to the road ends about key access to the new gates. Do you have any updates about that, or is there something that you can provide at a future council meeting?
Mr. Schwartz.
Yes, through your worship. So we have issued letters. We did a full mail out to all the area residents because some don't live in the direct area, so it has gone to their mailing address. Basically, the notification said that we will be changing the locks come March, mid-March. And we wanted them to come in and get a new key if they were allowed to, based on the policy that we created with council last year. So they are aware about that. We are having people come in and ask. There's been a handful so far. At that time, we would also surrender the deposits that we collected for the previous key as well. So that is taking place. Curtis Dray, our manager of road and parks operation, is heading that up. So if there are any questions that come forward with that, they can be directed directly to him, and he will help them get a key for the specific road ends that they're pointed to.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Are there any notices of motion? So, bylaws. If I could have Councillors Bagu and Hoyle move that the following bylaws be passed and enacted as presented. Bylaw number 7433/17/26. Bylaw 7434/1826. Bylaw 7435/19/26. Questions on the bylaws? All in favor? That's carried. And bylaw 18.3, if I could have councillors Bagu and Hoyle move. I think, or did I do that? I did that one. I'm not too. Oh, we did that one. Sorry, you had it on the back page. At this time, thank everybody for coming tonight, especially those from the public that came out for the items, a number of the items that were on the docket. Again, with information, passing information along to the city with regards to the letter from the regional chair. You can email the regional chair. It's what he stated last night in the town of Fort Erie at their council meeting. So again, that's bob.gale@niagararegion.ca. You can email City Hall at mayor@portcolborne.ca or any of your ward councillors, and they'll make sure that they pass it along to myself, senior staff, as we move forward. And you'll see daily changes on the website with regards to information as it comes forward and what we can find out. So we thank everybody for watching on on our WeeStream tonight, and this meeting is now adjourned.